Day One, the only app I pay for. As a kid, I used to really enjoy journaling. It was nice to occasionally look back and remember life more clearly, to see goals that I had set. There was this one journal sold at Walmart that I really loved. It was the exact right size, it was black, and it had a sleeve for storing important documents. As I grew up, I began searching for a better journal. Most of all, I started to hate the way my old journals would just pile up. There was no way I would be able to carry them all with me in my travels. Alternately, I didn't want to just leave all of my thoughts lying around. And despite my love for paper journaling, this was when I entered the world of digital encrypted journals. And it was after trying many different apps that I discovered Day One. First, I'm going to talk about my favorite things, and at the end, I'm going to talk about some of the things that I want to change. Let's talk about that. Hi, I'm Benjamin Butcher, he, him. I make videos about tech and gaming, and I really love what I do. So subscribe if you like it too. Did that rhyme? Let me start out by saying that I am a cheap motherfucker. If I can avoid an expense, I typically will. On occasion, however, I come across something that's so nice or so useful that I have no problem paying for it. Day One is one of those things. Now, because this is less of a review and more of a rave, I just want to point out that it's not SpawnCon. I'm not being paid to say any of this, especially given that I have less than 200 subs at the moment. Let's start with cross-platform use. Something which Day One has really done well is cross-platform use. I've used a lot of journaling apps in the past, and sometimes when switching from my phone to my laptop, I notice that one app is significantly different or maybe poorly developed. With Day One, while the designs do differ somewhat, the changes make sense and the overall functionality is not that different. Bonus points because Day One has integrated Touch Bar really beautifully. I would also point out that Day One is really good with bugs in that there aren't many, and typically when there are, the dev team is really good about squashing them post-haste. On the note of cross-platform use, I should also mention that it's amazing how quickly the app updates entries from my phone to my laptop. It's not exactly instant, but even with photos, it comes through in about 60 seconds, as long as both devices are on Wi-Fi. Next, let's talk about overall design. Okay, so I've been using Day One for years, and right from the start, something I noticed was how thoughtful the design and construction of the software is. Regularly, I would think to myself, I wish the app had such and such a feature, and lo and behold, within 5 minutes, I'd see that they had done it. The app has gotten a lot more complex over the years, but honestly, the things which have been added have created so much great functionality. Specifically, let's talk about the map. One feature that I really love is the world map. In Day One, whenever you create an entry, it's automatically geotagged. Basically, this means that if you're looking for an old entry and you know where you wrote it, you can just find it by looking on a map in that location. Something else that I love with this feature is that it automatically documents all the places that I've traveled, because typically I'm always journaling while I'm traveling. I'm really excited to use this feature more post-COVID. Next, let's talk about prompts. Another small feature that I've really come to enjoy is the prompts feature. Sometimes they're not applicable to me, but often they're really interesting and I enjoy writing about them. Next, multiple journals. So a few years into its development, Day One introduced the multiple journals feature. Initially, I thought this was a stupid feature because hello, I already use tags to organize everything that I need to. What I didn't realize at the time, however, is that with multiple journals, it's possible to blur sensitive entries from your main feed. For example, if you had written your social insurance number in your journal, which you probably shouldn't do, you could write it in your special secret journal so that other people can't see it while you're scrolling through your entries. Next, let's talk about templates. I'll start with tags. Templates basically allow you to make pre-made entries with any text in them or tags, which you can then summon and use. This means that instead of having to manually add all of my gym-related tags, for example, to every single entry that I make, I can just tap my gym template and all of the relevant tags and data are added automatically. It even pulls a little bit of health data from my health app. Another example of a template that I created is the pain button. Sometimes when something bad happens, I experience physical or emotional pain. To work through this pain, I've created a template with prompts to talk about what happened and what I can do in the future to prevent, accept, or mitigate this pain in the future. Credit to Ray Dalio for coming up with the concept. I love this a lot because it helps me to stop and process negative experiences in a really constructive way. The thing with templates is that they're really only limited by your imagination. The possibilities in this case are almost endless. Next, metadata. Another really cool thing about this journal is the amount of metadata that it collects automatically. It'll collect everything from the current day's weather to your location to the song you were listening to when you created the entry. There's a lot more, but as a bit of a nerd, I love having access access to this much data from the past. It's really interesting. Next, if this, then that integration. Another really interesting feature is how Day One integrates with if this, then that. One feature that I do use quite a lot is the Spotify liked songs integration. Essentially, every time I like a song on Spotify, my journal automatically creates an entry detailing when I like the song, as well as adding the album art, which is really cool. Here's the thing though, because I've found geographic data to be so useful in the past, I'd really love it if the song entries also had this data, but at the moment, they don't. Something I especially love about this feature is that it allows me to have a list of the songs that I love independently of any music streaming service. With a relatively small amount of coding knowledge, I could pretty easily convert the data from my journal into a playlist and add it to a new streaming service like Apple Music. Next, let's talk about tags. This is a big one, and it's probably my all-time favorite feature. Day One allows users to hashtag their journal entries. Just like on social media, tags are used to organize data. I don't really know if anyone else does this, but I use tags specifically for behavior tracking. For example, in 2021, I created a gym tag called Gym 2021. Now, whenever I work out, I add an entry that uses this tag, and I write a brief description of my workout, maybe a progress pic or something. What's great about this is that Day One also counts the number of times I've used that tag, so I can keep track of my workouts throughout the year. I can also filter my timeline so that I can see what workout I did last. This function also applies to my calendar in my journal as well, so I can glance at the patterns that are forming over the course of the month. Obviously, this does have a lot of other uses. I also use it to set goals for other habits I'm trying to develop. It's also encouraging to be able to compare this year's workouts to last year's and see that my numbers are going up. Lastly, I love using the tags function for making loose lists. Basically, I don't have to go and find the list that I was working on. I can just add it to the tag, and then if I want to, I can filter my timeline so that I can see a list of movies that are funny or ones that are sad, or I can filter for both. It's great. My only complaint at the moment is that Day One's mobile search function is really lacking when it comes to tags. Often when I search for a specific tag, and if I haven't used it that much, it just won't show up on my phone. This problem doesn't persist, however, on the desktop version, which is strange. Lastly, let's talk about future-proofing. One of the unfortunate realities about working in a world that's filled with apps is that sometimes app development companies die. I am keenly aware of this. But again, in keeping with their thoughtful design, Day One has developed a very good export system, so that if at some point the company does die and support for the software is no longer available, I can export all of my data in a couple of different forms that are on the screen right now. Lastly, let's talk about some of the things that I want to change. Because this journal is essentially every journal I've ever had, there's a lot of personal stuff in it. I love that Day One is always up to date with adding Face ID, Touch ID, and other new verification methods that may arise. However, my concern centers more around the fact that any mobile Day One journal can be opened with a 4-digit passcode. Now, I'm not a hacker, but truthfully, all the encryption in the world means nothing without a good password. I'd like to either be able to disable the 4-digit passcode and only use my Face and Touch ID, or make my passcode alphanumeric, or even just add more characters to it. Summary. So, as I've said, this was less of a review and more of a rave, but I do want to make it clear, if there were more bad things to talk about, you know I talk about them. You've seen the Bose Frames review, or if you haven't, you should. I also just want to stress how much I hate paying recurring fees. I find myself to be the kind of person who would rather buy something outright than just sling money at it indefinitely. So please keep that in mind when I say that this app is worth it to me. It's the piece of software that really got me into journaling, and honestly, it's made my life so much better. So thank you, Day One. Okay, that's pretty much it. I'm BRBTG, and as always, I'll be right back. I'm very excited to use this feature more post-COVID. There we go.